Greetings, greetings, greetings. Today we're getting into chapter 17 of Abeni's Song by Djeli Clark. Today's chapter is Into the Dark. So, all this time along their journey, you can romanticize what it's going to be like when you reach your destination. And once you get to your destination, it may be that romantic idea, But sometimes it's more or less than you expected. Sometimes it's nothing like you expected. And I don't know if they had an actual idea of what it would be like. I mean, they all had an idea about the goat man. But to face your nemesis, to come face to face with just how large and extensive what the goat man has done and is doing, and how it's affecting all these people, children in the way that it's affecting the children, the adults, the family, even the very land that feeds them. The waters, the rivers have dried up. The grass is no longer green. Like, this stuff is deep. So yeah, chapter 17, Into the Dark. They gotta bring the light some kind of way, right? This place is cursed, Zania grumbled. The four of them had returned from the pit and now sat with Damju in her cave, trying to make sense of what they had just seen. Why build something to take more children? Abeni muttered absently. Zania's earlier question burned in her mind. Why bring my friends here? Maybe the goat man just likes children? Naomi ventured. Don't be thick, Zania scolded. I'm just trying to help, Naomi shot back. Then say something useful like, we need to leave this place, Zania said. I thought you wanted to solve this mystery, the porcupine girl mocked. Zania grimaced. Not so much I want to be drawn into anything involving the witch priest. Let the mortals sort this out. Your spirits, Damju broke in. Everyone turns to her in surprise. This one, she gestured at Zania, keeps saying mortals. Who else would talk that way? But spirits, that's why the wish song didn't call you. Zania made a face as if swallowing something unpleasant. Maybe you heard wrongly, she suggested. Damju pursed her lips. My hearing's just fine, thank you. Naomi laughed, her quills quivering in delight. Now who's the thick one? The panther girl growled back, and the two launched into an argument. We need to find the missing children. Abeni's words cut through their banter like a knife. Everyone went silent. She wasn't certain what she expected. Partly she had spoken for her own benefit. She needed to know it didn't sound as crazy aloud as it did in her head. From the looks she received, she wasn't so sure. That has to be the stupidest thing you've said so far, Zania growled. Abeni started with an angry retort, then stopped. She knew this girl now. Zania hurled insults when her temper got the better of her, or something made her uncomfortable. Getting angry in turn never managed to solve anything. So instead, she bit back her own retort, smoothed her face, and tried something different. The night the shadow thing destroyed Asha's home, I spoke to a pot, she said. The magic pots in your song, Naomi asked. Abeni nodded. The one called the scrying pot. It can see things that are going to happen. She turned to Asha, who stared back curiously. Your sister, in her dreams, She spoke about this goat man taking the children. She called them the same thing Damju's mother did, the children of night. Then, on that night, the scrying pot told me, beware the children of night. She looked back to the others. Don't you see? These children of night are the missing children of this village. They must be, and I think we're here to save them. Naomi frowned worriedly, biting her lip. That sounds scary. I don't like scary. Zania shook her head. We're supposed to take the words of a talking pot. The first time I talked to the scrying pot, it told me to look out for shadows, Abeni countered. I just didn't know what it meant at the time. Its last words to me were about the children of night. Whatever happened to Asha's sister, this goat man, and these monsters is all the same thing. Wait, who is this sister? Damju asked, confused. Your valley, Abeni explained. A spirit lives here. I think this goat man and his monsters did something to her when he stole away your friends. That's why everything's dying. The blight, Damju exclaimed. It's why people say the spirits went away. Zania scowled, looking annoyed that they were even having this discussion. Even if all this is true, this scrying pot told you to beware the children of night. Wouldn't that be a warning? To flee here as fast as we can? It told me more than that, Abeni said. It said the children become hidden in darkness. To free them, you must seek them. I think that means we have to search for them. We're meant to free them. Everyone was quiet for a moment. Finally, Zania shook her head. Do you know what I think? Abeni opened her mouth to speak, but the panther girl went right on. I think you've wanted to come here seeking missing children all along. In all your big talk about finding Asha's sister, you just happened to leave out that the children of her village were stolen, just like yours. You think I didn't notice you asking this mortal girl's mother if she'd seen any other missing children? Would those be the ones from your village? Abeni fumbled for words. She thought of denying it, of telling the panther girl that she didn't know what she was talking about. But the more she kept things hidden, the more they seemed to pile up. She was getting tired of keeping secrets. As those orange eyes bored right through her, she settled on the only answer worth giving. The truth. Yes, she said. Ah, Zania exclaimed, pointing an accusing finger. So you don't deny it. It's not what you think, Abeni countered. I knew the children of the village Asha's sister looked over were gone, stolen away. I hoped that she could tell me something about what happened to them, that it might tell me more about what happened to my friends. I kept that from you. Yes, and that was wrong. She looked to Asha, but I wasn't expecting the man in the goat horn mask to be here, too. I didn't know he had hurt her and caused this blight. I didn't know about these monsters. Now that I'm here, though, what the scrying pot said makes more sense. Finding the missing children of this village could mean finding my friends. You don't know that, Zania yelled. Your friends might not even be here. These mortals and their blighted village just remind you of your own. You believe if you can bring back their missing children, it will be like bringing back your village. You think that way you can find your stolen life again. Abeni glared, her anger welling up despite her best attempts ready to pour out. Zania always seemed to know exactly the places to cut at, the ones that hurt the most. But she realized, in slow admission, that the Panther Girl wasn't so far off. With a deep breath, she let go of the anger. "Maybe you're right," she said finally. "Ah," Zania exclaimed again. "Does it make a difference?" Abeni asked, throwing up her hands in exasperation. "This witch priest robbed me of my family and everything I've known. He took you away from your sisters, separated Naomi from her family. Now he wants to do it to these people. You're right. I don't know if my friends are here. I don't know if Asha's sister can help you like you wanted. I wish I did. But if we can stop what's happening here, like the scrying pot said, I think we should at least try. Maybe I'll find my friends too. Maybe not. And if all we end up doing is saving the children of this village, that's worth it. Someone has to stand up to this witch priest. Show him he can't go around taking who he wants, ruining people's lives. This goat man blighted an entire land." Zania shot back. "He has an army of monsters, and he's defeated a spirit stronger than any of us. What chance do we have?" Abeni had to admit those weren't very good odds, but she wasn't ready to give up yet. "We have each other. That magic stone I used against the bush babies, the scrying pot told me the cat will know which one to choose. It knew I was going to find you, Zania. I'm betting it knew about Naomi too. We didn't all just meet by chance. You're always going on about mortals and how we do terrible things to each other. Now together, spirits and mortals, we can try and do some good. I know that you're scared, but..." The Panther Girl rose up before she could finish. Her orange eyes were on fire, and a growl sounded in her throat. "I'm not scared," she snarled, biting off each word. Abeni realized she'd said the wrong thing, but it was too late to take it back. "We need to do this, you say? We have to save these children? But you were the one keeping secrets. You were the one who jumped up after those monsters. Now it's about we?" She shook her head. "None of this is my concern. I came here to find out about my sisters, to return to them, not to go chasing after the riddles of some pot. Throw away your short mortal life if you want. I won't join you." With that, she shifted swiftly into a panther and trotted away into the tall grass. Abeni watched her go with disappointment. That hadn't gone the way she'd hoped. She turned to look at the others. Naomi's eyes slid down to stare at her hands. "I wish you had told us why you wanted to come here," the girl said, and Abeni flinched at the disappointment in her voice. Naomi had been the first one she'd met out here, the first one who had trusted her. "What you want to do might be right, but we're only small spirits. And you're just a mortal. What can we do against monsters? Against the witch priest?" She still said his name in a whisper. "Besides, I'm not the brave person you're looking for." "Naomi," Abeni said, "I think you're very brave. You saved me." But the girl shook her head. "Porcupine spirits live to dance and eat, not fight. We flee from danger, not run to it. I'm sorry, but I can't help you." Abeni reached out to say something else, but there was an explosion of pink mist and the girl was gone. Flowers? Damju asked, sniffing the air. Abeni sighed and turned to Asha. Do you think I'm making a bad decision too? Asha looked back at her and smiled. You're trying to save my sister, even though you know it's going to be very difficult. I think that's a hard decision, and sometimes we have to do things that are hard. I'll go with you if you like. I will too, Damju put in fiercely. It's my village after all. Abeni nodded at them both in thanks. At least she had that. Sitting back, she began to think on what to do next. People do not like being lied to, and apparently neither do spirits. So Abeni had a lot of time with Zania and Naomi and Asha to, at some point, tell the truth about why she's on the journey. Yeah, she encouraged Asha, but that was kind of easy because Asha's a child, and yeah, she want to find her sister and be with her sister. But Abeni at first wasn't doing it out of compassion for Asha. She was doing it because she wanted to get rid of Asha. But that was in the beginning. Now, after all this time, all this journey, especially when they were in the veil of lost things, she had the opportunity to tell the truth, the whole truth. Like, I want to go because I still want to save my family, my friends. Yes, I want my life back because there's nothing wrong with her truth. But sometimes we feel we have to hide parts of ourselves for whatever reason. And those reasons are a lot of times valid. But if you want those closest to you to trust you, and they're telling you all their truth, you know their reason for being on the journey with you, it's not fair if they don't know the reason that you're on the journey with them. So Zania's anger is understandable. Naomi's disappointment is understandable. Asha, she's with her till the wheels fall off. Not that they have any wheels, but that's just a saying. But yeah. So now it's just down to, I can't believe Zania left. And Naomi. But, I mean, honestly, she's asking a lot of them. The witch priest is a formidable opponent, to say the least. The witch priest isn't even there. This is just his peons who are pretty formidable. The goat man, these monsters. That's a serious battle. And Abeni believes in herself so deeply, and it's her love though too. Like, somebody gotta do something. This witch priest can't just keep on getting away with this. Him nor his peons can't just keep getting away with this. And she also believes in, like, her journey, the scrying pot, the messages that she was getting, the synchronicity of the messages that she was getting, leading her up to this. She believes in her purpose. She believes she's here for a reason. And so now everything's been put on the table. All the truth has been put on the table. Those who are standing by her side are by her side. Those who left. Now she has to figure out what to do next. But like I said, Abeni is a very courageous young girl. Very courageous. but you gotta be smart about it too. Like, you have to take reality into account. Whew, let's see what she ends up doing. Of course, she had no intention of taking either girl. What she was going to do was dangerous. Asha, as she was now, was too young, and she wasn't certain how Damju could manage. No, she would do this alone. She waited until late that night to head out. Both Damju and Asha had fallen asleep, expecting to be awakened, but she let them slumber, sneaking away from the cave. She'd investigate the pit and return by morning to tell them what she'd found. Then maybe they could come up with a plan and convince the other villagers to go along. Whatever Zania or Naomi thought, she wasn't reckless. All she intended to do tonight was look. The scrying pot had said as much. They become hidden in darkness. To free them, you must seek them. So that's what she was doing, going off to seek them in the dark of night. That made sense. And that beware part was probably because this was dangerous. Of course, the pot had said more, but in finding them, you risk losing yourself. She hadn't mentioned that to anyone, in part because she knew it sounded bad, and because she had no idea what it meant. How could she lose herself by finding them? Those pots and their riddles, she muttered silently. Her doubts clung to her like heavy weights, but she shook them off and resumed her walk. She made her way through the night, following a trampled path. When the tall grass stopped like before, she dropped low and crawled until she reached a place where the ground fell away off a rough edge. It was the pit, and inside were monsters. As she'd hoped, the monsters were all sleeping. They lay about everywhere inside the deep hole, sending up rumbling snores of snarls and growls into the night. Here and there a few torches burned, but not one of them was awake. Good. The question now was, where were they hiding the missing children? She'd already reasoned out it had to be wherever the monsters were. They wouldn't hide the children where they couldn't keep watch on them. So, if the monsters were in the pit, the children must be there too. She spied the top of a ladder emerging from the pit and moved quietly towards it. Finding her courage, she fit her staff across her back, then began her descent. The rickety ladder made more noise than she would have liked, and she couldn't help but imagine she was entering some giant's open jaws. When she reached the bottom, she let out a thankful breath. So far, so good. Gazing around the pit, she stared at the sleeping monsters who were even more frightening up close. She made out sharp teeth that jutted from their down-turned mouths and muscles that bulged beneath their odd clothing. They smelled, too. She wrinkled her nose with distaste. Like unwashed goats. She scanned the pit. These monsters slept without concern. They didn't appear to fear the children escaping. Maybe they had them locked somewhere where they couldn't get out, somewhere hidden. She kept searching, uncertain what she would find, until her eyes spied something of interest. There were great openings on the side of the pit wall, 3 in total. Each was wide and tall enough for people, even these monsters, to pass through. She guessed they were probably tunnels dug to mine for iron or whatever else the villagers were made to look for. But they would also be a good place to hide things, like children. They become hidden in darkness. Unfortunately, The openings were on the other side of the pit, straight through the sleeping monsters. She could turn back now, go up the ladder and return with what she knew. Maybe then she could get Zania and Naomi to join her, but even as she said it, she knew she wasn't going back yet. Just a little bit more, she mouthed quietly and started her way across the pit. Each step was a careful one, navigating through the sleeping monsters and trying to avoid sprawled out legs or twitching fingers. One wrong move could bring the entire place alive like a hornet's nest. She got a good scare when one of the monsters shifted as she passed, swinging an arm beneath her just as she lifted a leg. She froze, leg held up high, and waited. When the arm settled back down, she continued walking, trying to slow her thumping heart. Reaching the 3 openings, she stared up at them, wondering which to choose. Light showed from the one in the center, a glow that steadily increased. A torch, she realized. Someone was coming out of that thing. Without a second thought, she ducked into another of the dark tunnels, pressing against the earthen wall, just in time to see a figure emerge. Her breath caught in her throat. The goat man. He strode out of the tunnel, a towering figure in shaggy goat fur and a face covered in a mask of horns, as frightening as that day she'd first glimpsed him in her village. 2 monsters flanked him on either side. The 3 strode through the sleeping camp until they came to the mound of jagged rocks at its front. Climbing them with ease, they reached the top and then turned to look out across the pit. The goat man reached for something at his side. It looked like a long wooden flute. Bringing it to his lips, he blew, and music poured out. The wish song. Abeni felt the magic in the music wash over her as it had in the nights past, as it had that first day in her village. It was still beautiful, and she gasped at hearing it as her feet walked forward. No, the warning that had come last night sounded again in her head. This time, she forced herself to listen, planting her legs and fighting to keep them from moving. What was it Damju had said? The only way to beat the song was to not believe it, to know it was a trick, to accept that it was a lie. So that's what she told herself. She whispered it under her breath. It's not real. It's not real. It's not real. She said those words even as the song made her fondest wishes form before her eyes. Her family, Fomi, her friends, all beckoning her to follow the sweet music. She shut her eyes tight and fought. She no longer just whispered the words. She shouted them inside her head, and with her whole heart, she embraced them. She had seen this goat man work his magic. She had seen him among the storm women in her ruined village. She had seen him steal away her friends. She had seen what he had done to Damju's village and this valley. What he was showing her now was a lie, and she would not believe it. She would not. She exhaled a long breath as if hands that had been trying to squeeze her suddenly let go. When she opened her eyes, the visions had grown dim and transparent. The song itself had changed. It was no longer beautiful. It was a mess. Just a lot of blaring noise. She felt a pang of loss as the visions of her family faded away, knowing they would never come back. However, she didn't think the song was intended for her ears alone. Everywhere within the pit, the sleeping monsters began to stir. Arms stretched and legs shifted as they shook their heads and came to their feet. Soon they were all standing, their masked faces turned towards the sound. Suddenly there was rumbling. A Benny gripped the earthen wall. The ground was moving, trembling beneath her feet. As she watched with ever-widening eyes, something began to emerge right out of the ground in the pit behind the mound of rocks where the goat man stood. A great mask of dark iron appeared first, its sharp edges surrounded by twisted barbs. Massive shoulders came next as it pushed upward, followed by a chest and torso and legs. It was a giant man. He sat on a stool, big enough to fit his enormous frame. All of him, even his chair, was molded from rough and uneven earth, held together by bits of rock. As the carving came to a stop, the rumbling ended. Sitting upon his throne, the figure molded of earth and rocks towered higher than the pit itself. Then, without warning, his earthen head burst into flames. Fire, white and hot, spewed from the mouth and eyes of the iron mask, and Abeni silently mouthed his terrible name, the witch priest. Not him, of course, but something created in his image. As one, the monsters fell to take a knee, staring up into their master's fiery eyes, but Abeni's gaze drifted elsewhere. Nestled on the lap of the giant was a great crimson gemstone. Cut on every side with flat surfaces and sharp edges, it glowed bright, pulsing alongside the music that still played into the night. There was something else coming from it as well. Voices. The voices of children. Abeni first thought she was hearing things, but the voices were coming from the stone, faint yet unmistakable. They were crying and pleading as if trapped. The monsters went silent, listening to the music and the strange voices. On each of their chests, something glowed red as well, pulsing in time to the stone. She strained to make it out, but couldn't see. A horrible thought came to her. Were these the voices of the stolen children? Was she hearing the voices of her friends? Had these monsters somehow locked them inside the giant stone? No, that didn't make sense. How could a stone, even one so big, hold the children of an entire village? Whatever was happening, she wasn't going to figure it out standing here. Pulling her eyes from the monsters and the statue with the flaming mask, she turned and with cautious steps walked farther into the tunnel. It was darker inside than she'd thought. She couldn't even make out her hand in front of her face. Luckily, she had brought along some light. From her bag, she withdrew the stone ball Asha had given her. Shaking it slightly brought a faint glow that cut through the dark. She held it up like a torch as she went, letting it illuminate her way. Inspecting the tunnel walls, she'd found she'd been right. These weren't natural. The villagers had dug them. She put fingers to grooves cut into the rough earth. How long had these people toiled here? Walking on, she hunted for any sign, any hint of the missing children. She didn't know what she was looking for exactly. Perhaps a carved-out space or a gated pen. Even if she did find them, she'd never get them all out. But maybe if the monsters fell asleep again, she could spirit away one child or two, and then, well, she'd figured it out. She'd figure that out. But after what seemed like endless walking, she hadn't found anything. There were no signs of children at all. The tunnels weren't simply straight either. They twisted and turned, branching into separate parts. She'd gone so deep inside that she could no longer hear the music in the pit. Worse, wherever she was now, she had no idea how to get back to the entrance. In finding them, you risk losing yourself. Was this what the scrying pot had meant? She grunted in frustration as she rounded yet another corner. These passages were all starting to look the same. Stopping, she leaned against a wall. This wasn't going at all as planned. She hadn't managed to find a clue to the missing children, and now she was lost. A fine hero you're turning out to be, she muttered. Her eyes roamed the dark, landing on something that glinted nearby. She walked over, shaking the ball for more light. There were baskets. She counted 6 of them, woven from brown straw. They sat against the tunnel wall, each filled with small, sparkling things. Reaching inside one, she scooped some into her hands. They looked like glass beads worn in her village, only much harder, each one glimmering as if they held their own light inside. Was this what the villagers had been digging for? She was still staring when she heard a faint sound. She went still, straining to listen. It came again, something falling one after the other. It grew louder. Footsteps! Someone was in the tunnels. Someone was in here with her. Panic gripped her. Dropping the shiny things back into the basket, she made ready to leave, eager to put some distance between herself and those footsteps. Holding up the light, she moved to turn a corner and ran right into a monster. Okay, that's a whole nightmare. She's courageous, but wow, she went down into the pit of monsters. Walked through the pit of monsters. Thankfully, she wasn't seen by the goat man on her way coming in or going through the pit. Thank goodness for that. But there was nothing else she could do at that point but to go into the tunnels and try to see what she could see in there, because they were having their whole ceremony out there in the middle of the pit. But dang it. Let's talk about that discovery, though. That basket. That was diamonds. Diamonds. You know, the continent of Africa where the story is taking place and where things like that, not exactly this, of course, but the mining part is very real. The colonizing part, the psychological and spiritual warfare is very real. And making people dig out diamonds out of the earth. Africa has gold, oil, diamonds, herbs, just countless. I forget what's being mined in Congo to this very day and is causing deaths. And I remember even rubber, the country of Belgium committed so many atrocities against the people of the Congo for rubber. I would say right on up there with, I'm not even going to give a name to it because it's just too much. It's just the atrocities are countless. And so, yeah, not surprisingly, diamonds are in those baskets. So, yeah, Abeni has run into a whole monster. But let's not forget This courageous little girl isn't just a courageous little girl. She got skills. And so although that monster is huge from their descriptions, she still got skills. She was still trained to fight. She had a whole year of fight training, and she has her staff in her bag with her. So she ran right into a monster. But I have a feeling her skills are gonna just step up. I hope so. Because I can't imagine her getting caught. Ugh. Let's see what happens. Abeni cried out before she could even think. The monster was right in front of her. His huge, muscled gray body blocked her path, and his head grazed the ceiling. At her yell, he glared down from behind a mask covered in iron spikes. Eyes bright like fire gazed at her up and down. Then, opening a downturned mouth to reveal jagged teeth, he let out a deafening roar. Abeni stumbled, managed to spin around without falling, and ran. She could hear the monster in pursuit, roaring as he clawed hands scraped the walls. She ran faster, rounding corners, hoping to throw him off, but he kept coming, following just behind enough so that she could hear those lumbering footsteps always getting closer. At least twice she fell, scraping her knees, but she scrambled back up quickly. If she was caught, she'd be taken to the goat man, maybe locked away with the other children, or worse. She recalled those jagged teeth. What if this monster was just hungry? A shiver ran through her, and she ran on. Rounding yet another corner, she dared a glance back. No one was there. She allowed herself a moment of relief. Maybe she'd lost him after all. A sudden roar made her almost jump from her skin. The monster appeared out of the darkness directly in front of her. She braked hard, this time falling completely onto her back. He must have gone through another tunnel. Now he towered before her, cutting off her path. Scrambling backward on heels and palms, she managed to evade a clawed hand that snatched for her. Somehow, she got her staff out, not even bothering to think of a form. She swung it as hard as she could. The thick wood struck her pursuer across his exposed jaw with a loud crack. The monster reared back, roaring in anger. He grabbed at the staff like it was some annoying thing, and with one hand lifted and hurled it away. She went flying with it to slam against the tunnel wall. The blow was enough to knock the breath from her, and she fell to the ground senseless. Bits of light danced before Abeni's vision. A voice in her head was screaming to get to her feet, to run, but her ears rang and she couldn't remember how to make her legs work. As the monster stood over her, a terrifying image of those jagged teeth flashed through her mind. Suddenly there was growling, only it didn't come from the monster, and it sounded familiar. Was that a cat? Abeni twisted her head to find two orange eyes staring out from the darkness. There was a roar as a black shape soared over her. It struck the monster squarely in his chest, knocking him down. Abeni struggled to sit, watching the monster that now lay on his back. He bellowed in pain and anger as claws and teeth tore into him. Two massive arms finally managed to wrap themselves around the black shape, flinging it away. His attacker sailed through the air, changing and landing in a familiar crouch. "Zania," Abeni whispered. The panther girl glanced to her from beneath a tangle of locks before returning her gaze to the monster, now risen to his feet. He roared at her and charged. With a fierce growl, she ran for him, teeth bared and claws ready. Abeni watched as the two clashed. Zania's claws raked the monster's torso, tearing through his crimson fabric. He howled in pain, trying to grab at her, But she was fast. In a move that Abeni could barely follow, she flew up to flip off his back, coming back down to slash from behind and setting him to howling anew. But the panther girl could only hold off the monster for so long. One of his long reaches managed to catch her by the arm. She struggled, but he was strong, pulling her towards him. Grabbing one of her legs, he lifted her high above his head before throwing her down with great force. Abeni watched, horrified, as Ania hit the ground hard, bounced once, and did not get up. The monster snarled in victory. Reaching to his side, he pulled out something long, iron, and jagged. Abeni gasped at seeing the sword, surrounded with sharp barbs like teeth. Lifting the blade, he aimed at the fallen spirit and readied to finish what he had begun. Abeni was up on her feet and moving, crying out at the same time. She didn't know when she thought of it, but her hand was already digging into her bag. Reaching the monster, she opened it wide and threw its contents at him. Morning mushrooms in the dozens came flying. The same one she'd captured the night long ago for Auntie Asha, kept fresh in the magic bag. They streamed out, emitting tiny squeals as they jumped onto the monster, hopping and spreading across his body in a white mass. He looked down, lowering his sword arm as he tried to brush them off, but they kept crawling over him, wriggling to get beneath his clothes. Soon he dropped his weapon altogether and began an odd dance as he tried to rid himself of the things. Abeni thought they must have tickled. Dashing to Zania, she flipped her over, fearing the worst. She was thankful when the panther girl blinked her orange eyes open and groaned, glancing to the struggling monster. Morning mushrooms? Come on, Abeni said, not bothering to explain. She helped the girl up. Can you run? I can try, Zania panted. That was good enough. Grabbing her fallen light and staff, she supported the panther girl as they made their way down the dark tunnel, leaving the monster behind. Turn here, Zania said. You know how to get back outside? Abeni asked. I can smell it, she replied. What are you doing here? How'd you know where I was? I returned to find you gone, Zania said. This was not a very wise thing to do, mortal. Brave, but not at all wise. Asha was sick with worry, so I came after you. Abeni flinched with guilt. The two made their way through the tunnels, the panther girl guiding. When they emerged into the pit, she thought she'd never been so happy to see the night, but her joy faded as she gazed around. There were monsters. They were awake, still standing and staring up at the giant earthen statue of the witch priest, listening as the goatman played his music. As the two girls emerged from the tunnel, he stopped, lowering his flute and staring at them from behind his mask of horns. The monsters turned to follow his gaze, every last eye fixing on them. Abeni felt her stomach go hollow as those hungry gazes set on them. There was a brief silence as the two girls stared back. The awkward quiet was broken by the goatman, who pointed at them and let out a terrible roar. His monstrous army responded to his cry, roaring and breaking into a run for the two girls. Zania bared her teeth. Take whichever you want, she growled. But the one in that mask of horns is mine. Abeni wasn't sure if the girl was serious or if that was some bizarre joke. For the moment, all her attention was on the approaching horde. A separate roar came from behind, and both girls spun to find the monster they had fought in the tunnels. Free of morning mushrooms, his eyes blazed with fury as he raced for them. Abeni grimaced. Now they were trapped on both sides. Her mind went to the magic stones in her bag. Would one of them help? Her thoughts were broken as a cloud of pink mist suddenly exploded around them with the strong smell of flowers, and Naomi appeared. What took you so long? Zania snapped. I thought you'd run away. I made Prickly wait, someone said. Benny watched as a small form stepped from behind the porcupine girl. Asha! I needed time. I needed to time this just right. The little girl turned to the approaching monsters, opened her mouth, and then quite unexpectedly began to sing. Benny listened in surprise. It was just a tune with no words but strong. A sound that seemed too powerful for someone so small. It flowed through the night, and the monsters stopped their run, going still as statues. Benny gaped as Asha walked towards them, still singing. What was she doing? They'd tear her to pieces, but as the little girl entered among the monsters, they didn't lift a hand. Instead, breaking apart to allow passage, their baleful gaze transfixed. As fast as it started, the song abruptly ended. The night went quiet as the monsters shook their massive heads as if clearing them. One by one, they roared in rage at the small spirit now in their midst. Asha looked up at them with little concern, long locks falling back from her face. Her eyes locked briefly with those of the goat man, who now crouched on the rocky mound before she turned back to the others. Go, she ordered. Benny stared at her stunned. What? No! Go, Asha said again forcefully. Leave, Prickly, now. Naomi jumped at the command, grabbing hold of both girls. Benny could hear her own screaming as Asha disappeared between the towering monsters, and then the world went pink. She was floating in that place that smelled only of flowers. There was that odd feeling of moving while not moving before another explosion of pink. Then she was falling, landing in the middle of tall, dry stalks of grass. Whew. She looked around to find Naomi and Zania sprawled nearby, someone running towards them. Damju. What happened? The girl asked. Asha! Benny cried frantic. We left Asha! I'm sorry, Naomi squeaked. She told me to go. I just did. You have to jump back then, Benny pleaded. We have to go get her. Naomi closed her eyes and there was a hint of flowers but no pink mist. She shook her head. I can't. Too tired. When did both of you get so heavy? Heavy? What did the girl mean by... A deep growl sent everyone still. As one, they turned, and Benny gasped. It was a monster, the very one she and Zania had fought in the tunnel. He had been right behind them when Naomi jumped. Somehow he must have gotten caught in her mist. They'd brought him with them. He stared around, trying to make sense of what could have happened. But catching sight of the girls, he roared angrily as he lifted his sword and ran for them. Benny sprang to life. Zania was still recovering, and Naomi could barely sit. She had to fend them off. She had to fend him off. Staff in hand, she got to her feet, moving to meet his attack. The monster swung his jagged sword with both hands as she reached him. She ducked, going into the form, cutting the grass low to strike his legs. It was like hitting rock, and her arms hurt with the effort. He lifted his sword to swing again. Then someone else was there. Damju. The girl reached out to lob a fistful of yellow powder that hit the monster squarely in his face. He jerked back, then let out a great, big sneeze. He sneezed again and again so hard it shook his entire body. Benny took the opportunity to bring her staff up, sending it straight at his head, hoping to knock him senseless, but another strong sneeze made him twist aside just in time. The sturdy wood only grazed him, pushing along his shoulder and entangling in a necklace of iron ringlets he wore that held a small, dark red stone that pulsed like a beating heart. As she pulled her staff one way, he sneezed again and pulled the other. The ringlets broke apart, raining down in a shower, and the dark red stone fell away with them. All at once, the monster stumbled back as if struck. Dropping his sword, he clutched his head in both hands and fell to his knees. Then, as Abeni watched, he changed. His body shuddered, the corded muscles of his arms and legs rippling and growing smaller. In fact, he was shrinking fast. Rough gray skin turned brown and smooth. Claws became fingers. Sharp yellow teeth rounded to white. Soon he was no bigger than any of them. Small trembling hands reached up to the spiked mask that hid his face. Like his clothing, the thing was now much too big for him. He lifted it away, dropping it to the ground. The monster was gone. In his place was a boy. Still kneeling, he cowered away from them, eyes wide with terror as he trembled all over. Abeni stared. What had just happened? What was she seeing? She tried to put words to it, but her mind had gone blank. Zania limped to stand beside her, looking just as stunned. What sorcery is this? The panther girl whispered. Abeni shook her head. I think, she said, we just found the missing children. Okay, she found diamonds. She ran into this huge monster. I thought she was going to fight the monster off top, but she ran, which made full sense. And then not Zania coming for her, but not just Zania, everybody came. Everybody came. So sometimes, you got to take that leap of faith. She had faith in herself. She had faith in the mission. It's a difficult, dangerous mission that has the possibility of failure. But, she's willing to try to move forward and give it her all, literally. And so, first of all, she underestimated Asha, because Asha's not just a little girl, she's a spirit. And that song that she sang was spiritual. And so it affected the monsters in a way that nobody else could have. Besides, the goat man's stuff that the witch priest is giving him and gave him. But also Damju, because Damju is a survivor too. She's mortal, yes, and she's blind, yes, but she is a wise girl. Courageous, brave as well. And she got some skills with the herbs. She saved Abeni. So Abeni underestimated the two that she did still have with her. But the good thing is, because they were left behind, Zania and Naomi coming back found them. And so then they came up with a plan together. That's love. Those girls are basically more than just friends. They're sisters now. That's so cool. That's so cool. Crazy thing is, they did leave Asha behind. But Asha is a spirit. And she chose to make that move for her reasons. And then also how it happened with the monster being jumped back with them. Naomi grabbing him along with Zania and Abeni, and them having to fight him on their turf, so to speak, rather than in the pit with all the rest of the monsters. It was a one-on-one. So they were able to, let's go toe-to-toe. And in the midst of their fight, that stone, that red stone, which was pulsing along with the rhythm of the witch priest and the goat man's agenda broke. And then we get to see how the children were hidden. They were hidden behind masks. And the magic of that particular red stone that was attached to all of the rest of the goings on. So they also discovered, number one, where the missing children were, and number two, a way to defeat the monsters. Until next chapter.